Welcome to the Sravz technical series. In today's session, we will discuss Angular Ignite UI upgrade from version V15 to 16. In previous videos, we have discussed the upgrades from V14 to 15. So today we'll discuss the 15 to 16 upgrade. So in this session, these are the high-level topics we'll discuss. I'll quickly switch over to the VS Code. So this is the diff of the changes made. So as I mentioned in a previous session, we work from one lower version and we keep upgrading to the high versions. So this is the command I use to at least update the Angular libraries. Along with these, I had to upgrade the other libraries which are not Angular related but use them in the application. So let me quickly open the package.json that was upgraded. So there are a bunch of packages that had to be upgraded because of Angular upgrade. So now Angular from 15 we are at 16.2.12. Along with that, all these applications, all these packages will need to be updated because of Angular change. So for example, we use Nebular. Now instead of 7, it is 12. And then we have angular-auth-oidc-client, auth-oidc-client, which does the OAuth with social logins like Google and Facebook. So we upgraded that too from 9 to 16. So I'll switch back to the documentation link. So these are the topics we'll discuss now. Angular 16 is a major upgrade because in Angular 16 we don't support the view engine anymore. Everything is IV compiler. So IV view, IV engine. So due to removal of ngcc, because we no longer support view engine libraries, any library which was using view engine had to be updated. So that's why we have so many updates here. All these packages were using view engine, and since in 16 we don't use view engine, everything is IV. I had to upgrade everything that was using view engine, so that's why there are so many upgrades. Now, what is the difference between view engine and IV? There's a YouTube video here. You could go through that. If you have any questions, we can discuss that in a separate video. And then I just showed you the upgrades to the package.json, and in angular.json there were not any updates, so we can skip that. Other update I had to do was HTTP, Angular HTTP to HTTP client module. Angular HTTP was earlier deprecated, and now it is not there anymore. So anything that was using Angular HTTP had to be removed. So I'll switch over to one of those changes, AWS service.js, for example. So if you look here, before we were doing http.get, pass in a URL, and then we had to pipe it and use a map function and convert the response to JSON, which with the HTTP client, that is not needed. We don't have to convert to JSON because everything is converted to us into JSON by default. So you do HTTP get and pass in the TypeScript type you're expecting off of the JSON. Then you will get a observable of that type. So in this case, it is any type, and then we just pass the URL and options. Here before we had to get from the URL, then to that subscriber, to that observable, we had to pipe and pass a function, map function, and then we had to convert it to JSON. Now we can do that. JSON is the default return value for HTTP get. So wherever I was using those HTTP get before based on Angular HTTP, now all those are based on HTTP client, which is here in Angular Common HTTP. So that was one of the change. I put in a reference in the bottom so you can go to a reference which describes the change in details migrating to HTTP client. Then the next change we had to do was angular-auth-oidc-client. So this discussion you can skip if you don't use angular-auth-oidc-client. Sravz was at version 9 before. So if I go to package.json, OIDC client was at 9. Had to switch to 16. That was a major upgrade, many breaking changes. So I had to go through all of these migration guides to eventually get to 16, and it works now. So instead of going through this migration guide, I'll just let you know at a very high level how it works in the version 16. So if you use this package, you can directly make these changes so that it works for version 16. So we'll just go through the OIDC changes. Now in version 16 of OIDC, it's much straightforward. I have the auth module here, auth module.ts, authentication module. So in the authentication module, we have angular-auth-oidc-client. We just get the auth module from there. Before we were doing a bunch of other things, auth module, OIDC, config service, etc. We don't have to do all that. Just get the auth module. And the auth module for root at the application level, inject the config. So it's available throughout the application. This is a Google config. So if you use any other configs, it's an array. So you can provide multiple configs. In my case, that's only one Google config ID. This constant is constant points to Google string, and then Google requires a bunch of other parameters like this: authority, client ID, redirect URL, which is the location.origin and / Google redirect, etc. So it has to be like this, and then max ID token offset allowed in seconds is 30 seconds. So this parameter is used to validate the token sent by Google. At the redirect URL, Google will send a token. The browser within 30 seconds has to validate that token, or else the token will go invalid. So that is to avoid token stealing. So that's the only config you have to do to use the OIDC auth config in the version 16. So once you do this, then in the UI, once you log in, you go to the base OIDC provider. I have a class which does the authentication. So before we had to do well-known endpoints, etc. We don't do that anymore. You just, in the login, you do this .oidc security service .authorize and the config ID, in my case Google, which I showed in the main module. When you log in, you just do authorize config ID, which is Google. Then the UI will redirect you to the Google UI for login. Once you enter the Google UI, Google authentication, it will send you back to the redirect URL, which is in your application. So in the routes.config, okay. So in the Google, when Google is redirect, you have a redirect component where you get the redirection. So you go there. In the redirection component on init, so in the read component on init, which is triggered when Google redirects you to your redirect URL, you call external auth service get user info. That will bring you back to base OIDC provider, right? So in the redirect component, you call the get user info. When get user info is called, it will get the user information from Google, and then OID service also provides a is authenticated observable to which you subscribe. When is authenticated is true, you get the user data from Google. And then once you have the user data from Google, you can pass it back to your backend where you can store it in your database. And then issue a JWT token and then use the JWT token to log in, and then the user is logged in. So all that happens in the production server. I'll quickly browse through it. So I'll show that in action. So we have the production server. Then we sign up Google. So Google went through redirect URL. It got the tokens. Now the browser will use this information to pass it back to Google and get the user information from Google. And once user information is obtained, then it will go to the landing page. I'm already logged into the Google Gmail, so that's why it didn't give me the login page, and it should redirect me to the landing page. So it will go to the dashboard screen. Okay, with that I'm logged in. Now if I see my profile page, it should show my username and email ID. So that's how the angular-auth-oidc-client 16 works. It's a very straightforward implementation now compared to the earlier versions. So with that, I'll close today's session. There are a bunch of references here. You could go through them. If you have any questions, please ping me in the YouTube channel or in the discussion tab in the documentation page at this point. So thank you for watching. Until next video.